In 1 to 2 sentences, who are you?
I am a 37-year-old woman from the UK. I do digital marketing, and well, there's a whole lot more to me than just that, but that's kind of it for now.
Cool, and we'll get into it. And how do you make money online?
I provide digital marketing consultancy services. So my area of specialty is SEO, more technical SEO and paid search. So I kind of provide strategy and then deliver the strategy for various different clients.
Awesome. And what is your favorite thing about digital nomading?
Up until 2 years ago, the freedom. And now I think it's still the freedom, but I don't get to travel, obviously, because there's restrictions in place. But at least I'm not tied to a desk, 40 hours a week, making someone else really, really wealthy and me just taking a basic salary,
And where are you now, and what are your 2 to 3 favorite cities in the world?
Currently in Canggu, Bali. My favorite cities. I'm not really a city person. I prefer the beach. But in terms of cities, I think Barcelona will always have my heart. Delhi in India, I did like that. And I think Manchester.
What's your best concise advice for aspiring digital nomads?
Be patient. It'll happen. It'll come. Just be patient. Keep chipping away every day.
And what small changes made a big difference in your life?
Just taking more time for myself, being more conscious of my mental health and listening to what my body needs, whether it's, mentally or physical. Kind of having a bit more awareness about that and prioritizing that, and it does wonders.
And what is your favorite book?
That's a difficult one because I'm a bit of a reader, but the Harry Potter series will always be one of my favorites. I mean, I named one of my cats Albus.
Love it.
But I think for kind of a more adult audience, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. That book, I bought that book just before I started doing digital freelancing and traveling around the world, and it really changed. It really helped change my perspective on being aware of what I care about and letting go of the small things.
And if you had 20 seconds to live, what message would you share with the world?
Just be kind. You never know what's happening behind the surface. All the selfies and kind of social media representation that people put out there, it's bullshit. Be kind to other people and call your parents more, definitely. That's something that I wish I could do.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing those rapid fires. We'll jump into the regular part of the interview now. I'd love to start just by getting an overview for anyone who's listening of your digital nomad journey. Like, when did it start? How did it start? And just paint a broad picture of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So I think there was one major event in my life that kind of triggered me into taking action, and that was the death of my father. He was really special to me, and he was kind of like my person in the world. And dealing with the grief of that loss was really, really difficult, and I got to a pretty bad place in my life. I've never really been a kind of negative or down or depressed person, but the effect of that was, severe depression. I kind of got myself into a bit of a hole, and it felt like there was no way out. And then I was very, very fortunate in that my mom decided to give me and my brothers a little bit of inheritance, and she wanted me to use that money to buy a house. And I was this close to buying a flat, a really beautiful flat in Manchester. And me being me, always being the rebel, just before the point of no return, I was like, I'm packing up all my stuff into storage. I'm quitting my job, and I'm going to go see the world. And my intention was to do that just for a year or so, because with the money that I had, and I had some saved up as well, it would have been, sufficient to keep me going for 12 months or so, traveling around Southeast Asia, which is somewhere that I'd always wanted to go. And along the way, I just picked up a few clients here and there. A friend of mine, she started her own agency, like a small agency in Manchester. And there were some clients that she couldn't service that needed a freelancer because, they're smaller budgets. And she sent me quite a bit of work that way. So that kind of got things in motion. And then I discovered Upwork and started finding a few clients on there. And then I started to realize actually this could actually be a way of life for me. I don't need to go back to the UK. I don't need to go back to the security of having, a full-time job and being miserable, because I was miserable, without really realizing it, because we're conditioned by society to have a pretty standard life. You go to school, go to university, you get married, you have some kids, and you focus on career along the way. And it's just kind of pretty much expected of you, especially in my family, that you follow that format and that you have a job. And I don't know, it just didn't work for me, and I got to the point where I realized this is a dangerous situation. I need to prioritize my happiness and not just do what everyone expects you to do. And so I took a bit of a chance, and then here I am 4 years later.
It's interesting, the piece that you mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of things to dive into, but one thing that stuck out to me was talking about being miserable and then snapping out of it. And sort of, I identify with this because I feel like once I left my home environment, it gave me a perspective to look back at my old life. And all of a sudden, I'm looking through with a completely different lens, and it's like, man, how was I doing that? How did I do that to myself? And it sounds like you went through a similar experience, and this is a big reason why I'm such a big proponent of not necessarily just digital nomading, but long-term travel, because it gives you a new perspective and allows you to look back.
It really does, yeah. I mean, you meet people along the way who kind of help. That's the funny thing about travel. You never know who you're going to meet. And the thing is that you probably, if I'd stayed in Manchester, I almost certainly wouldn't have met the diverse range of people that have entered my life, good and maybe not so good, in various ways. That's the beauty of travel, is that you get this opportunity to see the world through someone else's lens who you definitely would never have met if you just stayed in your little rat race bubble back home.
And so when you think about your life back in Manchester before you started, what were the things, I mean, you talked, I think the word you used was miserable, and what were the things though that contributed to those feelings? Like, what is it that's so different that you have now that you didn't have then, that has led to just a very different perspective, different quality of life? What are the key differences for you?
Where do I start? I have following, This morning I set my alarm for 6 a.m. wanting to, last night I set my alarm for 6 a.m. ready to, take on projects because I'm really busy. And I woke up with my alarm and I was like, no, fuck that. Snoozed it for a couple of hours and I still smashed today, I maybe worked a couple of hours later than usual, but you just can't do that. You can't call up your boss and say, do you know what, mate? Don't feel like coming in for 8:30, 9 o'clock. I'm going to be in maybe 11, 12 o'clock. Can't do that, It's like we're treated like children, but we're expected to work really demanding hours. And I think there's a lot of research on at the moment, especially in the Scandinavian countries, looking at doing 4-day working weeks or kind of compressed days, and productivity actually increases in terms of work delivered in those circumstances. And I've got to say, it's absolutely right. If you give yourself 8 hours to do one task, it'll take you 8 hours. Whereas if you give yourself 3 hours to do it, you'll smash it. And it's that mindset that's really difficult to break. I think with the pandemic in the last 2 years and the forced transition to remote working has shown businesses that workers are actually reliable. The vast majority of people are inherently good. They're not, kind of just going to sit at home and do nothing. I mean, there will be days where that does happen, but generally, anyone with a good conscience will make up that time, and that's the ability that I have every day, dedicating myself to projects that I'm really invested in, not having work dumped on my desk and saying this is what we're working on. I get to choose my clients. I get to choose when I work. If I want to take a month off, I can. No one's going to tell me I can't, and that's just invaluable. So yeah.
That's great. Well, I can feel the positive vibes and the energy as you speak about it. I want to shift a little bit to talking about travel speeds and depth of connections with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I've thought about a bit, just I think also on the productivity side of how much you can get done when you're in places for short or long periods of time. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on mean, especially as you started traveling, the difference but in building relationships and how that process went and how your thinking went around travel speeds?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's kind of difficult because it's been 2 years since I was really doing that, and I have always preferred to stay in one place for a little bit longer. Not just kind of going from one city to the next. I did that in Vietnam pre-pandemic, and I remember I had one project that was really, really urgent, and I had my laptop with me in my bag, just so happened, and I was, picked up my emails, and I just stopped for lunch and did like 4 or 5 hours worth of work, met the deadline, and then forgot about it for, the rest of the day and enjoyed my day, eating amazing Vietnamese food. I think with technology nowadays, like the freedom is so much easier. There's reliable Wi-Fi pretty much everywhere. The Wi-Fi here is better than back home, I think, in some instances, like 100 megabytes. Like that's pretty easy to get here in Bali. And like when I was in Manchester, I was paying like £40 a month for, I think maybe 20 megabits. And it was crap, So it's like the rest of the world has a lot of potential to kind of enable you to live that life. Like if you've got an urgent deadline pop up, you've just got to sometimes think on your feet, and sometimes you've got to learn to say no and not stress yourself out. But if you absolutely have like an urgent deadline, you can get it done anywhere. You just have to apply yourself, find yourself like a really quiet little space. If you can't find a quiet space, put some earphones in, put some classical music on that's not going to distract you, and just crack on and do it.
I like the mentality. Well, I want to use that to transition into talking about your freelancing business. You already touched on, it seems like in many respects you started traveling and then the freelancing business kind of just happened. You were obviously open and receptive to other things, but it seems like it snowballed, and then you realize, wow, this is something that I could make into a reality, and you pushed forward and it's grown to where it is now.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you would wish you had known about freelancing before you started. Like if you were talking to yourself 6 years ago and you were trying to encourage yourself to get going in freelancing, what would you have said and what advice would you have given?
Just do it. Just do it now. Don't wait for the perfect opportunity or the right time, because it will never come. You have to make it. Obviously, I had a bit of an unfair advantage due to, my parents helping me in that sense. I did pay for it because my mom gave me an absolute bollocking for spending that money on travel rather than a house. Now, 4 years down the line, she's seen the difference in me, and she's actually, really proud that I did that, and that I had the balls to just go and do that and set myself up with a business that's going to last me for life. My mum had her own business as well. She wasn't a digital nomad. She worked from home, but she had her own business doing translations and interpreting. And to see me kind of follow in that direction, I think she's super happy about that and super proud. And I said, yeah, I think just make it happen, because you're the only one that's gonna be responsible for you and your own happiness, and you just have to take it by the reins, take ownership and make it happen. I understand that it's really easy for me to sit here and say that because of the privilege that I've had with regards to the starts that I had from my parents and also from my friends sending me work, which was invaluable. But there are always ways to go about things. You don't need to buy a coffee every single day. Like those £3.50, £4 that you spend on one coffee over the course of a month on the way to work, that adds up to quite a bit of money. You can easily cut back on little things that aren't necessary and start saving a bit of money to get yourself started. That's what I would say.
And I think the story you've told about your friend who started an agency and was sending you work or clients that were too small for her.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because I think beyond, some people might say, oh, that's very fortunate, but it also feels like a very real strategy. of you built a relationship with, well, you obviously left a positive impression on someone else from either working with them or being friends with them. And I imagine for a lot of freelancers or for a decent number of freelancers, that probably is a lead generation way, is reaching out or connecting with other agencies that might be at a different scale and might be servicing like different types of clients in the same niche and trying to get, I don't know if cast off work is the right term, but just clients that don't fit them, where they're like, oh, but I have this other person I can recommend you. And so it feels to me like a very real strategy that people who are maybe already freelancing or thinking about freelancing should probably be thinking about.
Absolutely, yeah. I think generally when you've worked in the industry for a few years, whether it's at a digital agency or whether it's in-house, if you go to events, digital marketing events, and network a little bit and put your name out there just a little bit and build friendships with people, like genuine friendships. Like this is how I started with Stacey, the agency owner. She was working for an agency. I was working for an agency. I interviewed for her agency. They didn't give me the job. But me and her, like, we became good friends. We spent many a night getting absolutely sloshed in Manchester. So, talking about the future, kind of what we want to aspire to. We had kind of like an idea that maybe, we'd end up in an agency together or somehow we'd end up working together. That didn't pan out. That relationship, that the way, if I'd have handled it differently, that rejection of not getting that job, that relationship wouldn't have flourished. Like I could have been like, oh, well, fucking, fuck you didn't hire me. That's such a bad attitude. Like that job obviously wasn't right for me, and that's okay. Something else will come along. The way you handle yourself and the way you kind of put yourself out there, it makes a huge difference. And, a few years later, after many nights of getting drunk together and, watching her build a family and have like, two, three sons. And there's me, the lesbian in the corner, just getting drunk, watching everybody else get married and have kids. Absolutely fine. She's an unbelievably kind person. And I understand that, again, it's privilege that I have, someone like that in my life that will have that kindness in them and that consideration of, yeah, do you know what, rather than trying to service a client that just isn't right for her agency, do you know what? I'm gonna give it to Lou because I know that she'll be able to do a really good job and she'll really appreciate the income. Like that little help. Every single client that she sent me signed up with me and lasted 3-6 months. One even lasted a year. So she sent me quite a lot of work. It was amazing. And all I would say is for anyone that's looking to kind of start doing this is like start now, start networking. Be aware of how you present yourself. Go to different events. In the UK, there's a really big one called Brighton SEO. It's amazing. It's filled with the industry's leading SEOs and consultants, but also companies, and it's a great opportunity to meet people. And you can have amazing friendships come out of it, and that ultimately can turn into a working relationship as well. But friends first. It makes a difference. When I have clients that I can't service, or if I have too many, I'll always pass them on to people that I know will do a good job, and they're always my friends.
That makes sense. And from a more granular execution perspective of your freelancing business, from let's call it the sales calls to delivering work and even to retaining clients and building good relationships, what have you learned, or what advice would you give to someone else?
This is going to be a little bit emotional for me because this is something that my dad taught me from a very young age. My dad was in marketing himself. It was a different type of marketing, but it was more sales and kind of it was different, but it was still essentially kind of related to what I do. And my dad taught me from a really young age that communication is key. Rather than trying to focus on getting people to sign up or kind of promoting yourself as the right person, he kind of always gave me this advice to get to know people. Take the time to have 5-10 minutes of chit chat. Get to know about their personal lives, their wives, husbands. children like take an interest in who they actually are outside of work, and that will kind of build like a foundation of friendship, as well as having, you know, that working relationship, but having like that mutual respect of them as an actual person, rather than, you know, someone that you have to service. And you know, my dad was one of those guys that's always got the perfect answer. Like whenever I had a problem with work, or I didn't know how to tackle something, or if I had personal problems at work, you know, like this woman's giving me a hard time, or blah blah blah, I could tell him, I could pick up the phone and tell him, and he would just come up with the perfect solution every single time. I think if you're lucky enough to have someone like that in your life, like fully utilize it, like kind of nurture that relationship, make the most of it, you know, and yeah, like always listen to your parents, because they're always right. They are, annoyingly. They're usually right.
Well, my last question on the freelancing side, and then I actually have a question or thought on the parent side, which I'll dive into, but are there any resources, which might be books, podcasts, thought leaders, or learning resources that you recommend to someone interested in, let's say, the marketing side that you understand well, which sounds like SEO, paid search, or on the broad freelancing side? Like, are there any key resources where you're like, that was really helpful, and if you want to get into this, you should check that out?
Aside from the kind of typical blogs like Mozblog, Search Engine Land, Marketing Land, like there's loads of these like websites that are incredibly useful, and I do stay up to date using those. I've kind of just, honestly, I've just learned on the job. I've learned as I came along, like, and a lot of SEO anyway is guesswork. You know, you take the data and you make an informed decision, but you never really know, because Google don't really tell us what was included in this algo update. You never really know how it's going to affect. When they release a core update, you never know how it's going to affect a site. And they never tell you, you know, too much information as to what part of the algorithm was updated and how you can basically fix it if it goes wrong. So a lot of it is trial and error, making informed and educated decisions, and using the data that you have to make that kind of strategic guess, and learning from your mistakes, learning from your wins, like why did it win, how, and also from your colleagues as well, like people that you know in the industry. Like I said, going back to, you know, Brighton SEO, it happens like twice a year, but it's such a good event. Like I would fully recommend anyone in the UK. And if you can't attend in person, I'm pretty sure they do it online as well. You know, there's some really great talks there. And yeah, I would kind of say, you know, just take the information that you have and apply it to the situation and learn from it, whether it's a win or a loss. Just be honest with your client and say, do you know what, this isn't working, but this is the next step that we're going to do, so we're going to make this work, you know, and just kind of go from there. Learning by doing. I like it. Yeah. I like it a lot. Yeah. Well, when I got into digital marketing, there was no university courses, you know, like there are today. I actually did biomedical science at university, which is completely unrelated. And then I started doing photography and graphic design, and then I fell into marketing. So I have no marketing qualifications at all. I don't need them because I've got a shit ton of experience. Yeah. Well, I generally think that's the way the world is shifting, and that the boxes you've checked matter a heck of a lot less. Like my longer term prediction is that university degrees and things of that sort are going to matter increasingly less as we move to more of like a skill based and a lot of just remote, where you can find opportunities anywhere. It ultimately is like, can you help my business? Can you do the job? And regardless of what credibility stamps or whatever it is that you have, if you can do great work and you can learn anything on your own, and you can learn something by getting a job and getting going, I think it's a matter of figuring out how to get off the ground and get rolling, and then learn along the way. Absolutely. I fully concur with that sentiment. I think unless you're going to go into law or like a medical field or something that's vocational, where you absolutely need that university level education, then yeah, like that is invaluable. But I don't know about the rest of the world, but in the UK, the tuition fees are extortionate now. They never used to be. Same in the US. Yeah, they're extortionate, right? I think maybe even more so in the US than in the UK. But like on average, I think I think it's around 60 to 80,000 pounds of student debt. That's pretty standard for most students now to leave university with. And yeah, if you're going to end up in a role where you're a solicitor or a barrister or a doctor, and you work your way up to being a consultant or a partner, and you're going to easily earn six figures, crack on. That's a great opportunity for you, like do it. But if you're going to come away with that level of debt and you're going to go into digital marketing, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Like I'd say, yeah, get a good education, get a good standard of education. You know, you can go to college when you're 16, 17, 18, and you can do like a diploma or a shortened course and kind of get some education. But generally, there's a lot of schemes in the UK where the government fund businesses and pay them to take on apprentices.
I think that's right.
Apprentices. And so, you know, you can have these like opportunities where you're working for a business 3-4 days a week, and then you're in college 1 day a week, and the apprentice gets paid for it and the business gets paid for it. It's tax deductible. That if you apply with a digital agency, you know, at 18 years old, your brain is a sponge, and you have the ability to retain and take in so much information. And by learning on the job, like within 2 years, you'll be employable anywhere. And you can easily command a salary of like 30, 40,000 pounds within a few years, which is well above the national average. And you don't really need, you know, a degree and that level of debt to go into digital marketing. It just doesn't make sense.
I hear you loud and clear. I want to touch on something on the parent side, which is something I've experienced in my life. And from afar, it seems like this will likely also resonate with you, but I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Sure.
I had to go through, I guess there's like two broad phases in my life with my parents. I think all parents have expectations of like what they want their kids to do. And frequently, depending on the parent, they'll have sort of paths that they approve of and paths that they don't approve of. And I had to, I think, go through just a transition mentally, internally, of becoming okay with my parents disapproving of my life and my choices, and accepting that they have their way of thinking and their paths, and I'm going on a different path, and it's not wrong. It's not necessarily bad. It's just it is what it is, and understanding that in the long term, hopefully they will accept this and they will be okay with it. But in the short term, it doesn't fit into how they view the world. And so they are going to fight really hard to stop me from doing this. From the story you told of your dad's passing and almost buying the flat in Manchester and then snapping out and traveling and your mom being upset, it felt like you might resonate with this sentiment. So I wanted to pass it over and get your thoughts.
Oh, massively. I mean, before all of that happened anyway, my parents were, my mom still is, devout Catholics. I was raised in the strictest environment in that sense. And when I was 19, I had to face up to facts and be like, oh yeah, by the way, I like girls and you're never gonna see me, you know, with a guy. The shit really hit the fan, big time. Like our relationship for about 5 years was pretty much destroyed. It was horrendous. Their reaction was, they were disgusted, to be honest with you. They were really disgusted. And I think at that point, you know, around that time, I was just like, fuck it. You know, if you can't accept me for who I am, then that's your problem. And I know that you're my family. And I was in a very unique position in that I chose my family. I was adopted when I was little, and I chose my family, and they chose me. And they had a very specific path in their mind that they wanted me to take, you know. And yeah, like I said, I've always been a rebel. I've always kind of broken the mold and done what I want to do. And yeah, when all of that was happening, that was around the time when I was at university and doing the biomedical science degree. I was not interested in it. I enjoyed it a little bit, but it's not what I wanted to do. And, you know, with their reaction of me coming out to them and, you know, that whole situation, it gave me like the momentum and the balls to not give as much of a fuck of what they expect me to do. Like, I realized that I've got to do what I want to do, and that's just how it is. And then I kind of started making a few executive decisions that they did not approve of whatsoever. And yeah, I think when it came to pulling out of buying that place in Manchester and traveling the world, both of my older brothers were incredibly supportive. They were amazing. They were really, really like, yes, let's go do it. This is a fantastic opportunity. And especially the younger of the two brothers, he'd just gone traveling as well for a year or so. And yeah, my mum was petrified. She thought I was going to end up dead and raped, or something terrible was going to happen to me. And obviously it didn't happen. I'm pretty street smart, and it's all about making good decisions. And yeah, I think kind of breaking those expectations and breaking that mold is really important. And don't be like what you're expected to be. Like, just be who you are and just follow that path, and life will be so much better, so much more beautiful.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that.
No worries.
That was powerful, and that was great.
No worries. Yeah.
So I think to wrap up, let's transition to doing a deep dive on one specific Nomad location, which we talked about doing Canggu, Bali, since you're there. And it's also, for anyone listening, is also my favorite place in the world where I plan to get back to once the world settles down a bit. But let's start with, just for anyone who's thinking about going there as a nomad, it might be a 1 month trip, or it might even be a multi-year trip like yourself. What are your general thoughts, pros and cons? Give us an overview.
We'll start with the cons first.
Okay.
The rainy season sucks.
And as far as pros and general thoughts beyond that?
Loads. There's the pros definitely outweigh the cons. For me, it's the fact that, if I want to go scuba diving this weekend, there's nothing to stop me. If I want to go to a smaller tropical island, for a week's holiday, it's affordable, it's easy to get to. Even with the restrictions, we can still do it as long as we've got the right tests and we're vaccinated, which, the fact that there's so many amazing cafes and restaurants and co-working spaces here, you have so much choice. And with the lack of tourists, you get to see a different side of Bali in general. It's very peaceful, even in Canggu, where it can be pretty chaotic even now, but it's still, it's a really nice time to come to Bali. Another pro is definitely like the dry season, because when the dry season does come, it's beautiful here. It's perfect. So yeah, the weather is a pro and a con. Diving
into the Wi-Fi, what would you say about the Wi-Fi? You talked about, I think this is the same challenge, or I think through this interview, you've touched on a few different things, which is similar to how I feel, which is you can find really fast Wi-Fi. You deal with power cuts, especially during the rainy season. And so there are some inconsistencies. Anything else to add on the Wi-Fi side?
Yeah, I lived on Koh Phangan for a few months, and the power cuts there were horrendous. They were a daily occurrence. So that made it a bit more difficult. But here in Bali, it doesn't seem to happen, as much as it has in other places. India was really, really bad for power cuts. Definitely, I would say invest in a surge protector, for your laptop, for your MacBook, whatever you're using for your electronics. Make sure that you get a really good quality adapter, and that it's not gonna fry your computer, because that does happen. I think it's a small price to pay for what you get here. And even in Koh Phangan, it was pretty remote where I was. Like, there was still really good Wi-Fi, aside from the power surges and the cuts. But here in Canggu in Bali, pretty much standard to have minimum 20 megabits, but 100 megabits is very easy to find. And in the co-working spaces, like, it's super reliable. Yeah, it's easy to find.
And I think I'll add on to the previous pros section from my own perspective. I think I'll say that the food in Canggu, just the diverse and healthy food, I love being able to ride it everywhere on a scooter, and just the freedom there's also the danger, and you've got the fractured wrist right now to show for it. But the freedom of riding around on a scooter, I feel like makes every day feel like an adventure.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that anyone that's coming here, take it steady and make sure you learn how to ride a scooter safely, and absolutely get a full face helmet, because if you wear the little crappy ones that just cover this, I've known people that have had accidents, been wearing these, this half face helmets. They've cracked their jaw and it's cost them 40,000 euros in the hospital bills because they've not had insurance. That's another thing. Get really good insurance. Do not skimp on your travel insurance, because it'll happen, if you ride scooters long enough, especially here in Bali. Vietnam was chaotic. Thailand, super chaotic. I think now with the pandemic, the traffic is a little bit easier. But yeah, it is. Anything on two wheels is dangerous. So, just make sure you've got your insurance, learn, and don't drink, because it's a pretty common thing here. It's pretty standard for people to drink, drive home. And I've seen so many accidents because of, drink driving. It's pretty horrendous.
Let's talk about cost of living a bit. Give us a breakdown: apartments, food, costs. What can people expect?
Whatever your budget is, there's definitely a solution. If you have $1,000 a month to live off, you can do it. Maybe you won't get to eat in all the nice places that you want to, or kind of, do all the things that you want to do. But, you don't need to have a huge budget to live comfortably out here. Say, for example, when I was living in Manchester and I was renting a flat, I think I paid maybe around £600 a month, £650 a month just for the flat, no bills included. And I had a shitty little basement flat with no, there was windows, but they were just at pavement level. It was dark, it was dingy, but I stayed there for 3 years because I loved it. It suited me perfectly, but it was just a small 1-bedroom flat. And for that kind of price out here, I mean, you can have a 3-bedroom place with a swimming pool easily. When I was living in a villa not so long ago, and I had a 2-bed place, and I think I paid less than $500 for it was in a nice little quiet area with a swimming pool and a kitchen. Unfortunately, loads of construction started happening all in one go, and that is a fact of life here. Construction projects. Construction
and roosters. Those are the killers.
They are the killers, yeah. The wake-up call at 3 a.m. from the roosters makes you stop being such an animal lover. You want to go wring their necks. But actually, I was living in that villa and I was super happy and content. And then all of a sudden, 5 construction projects sprung up all around me, and I was paying month by month. There are great deals that you can get for 12 months when you pay up front, or you can pay in 6-month installments, but you are basically stuck there. And construction can happen at any point, and there's nothing you can do about it because you've signed a contract and you've already paid. So it's a little bit more expensive to pay month by month, but for me, the security of having that freedom of leaving whenever I need to is amazing. From there, because I needed to move fast, I just moved into a guest house where my best friend was staying, and I pay less than $200 a month. And
wow.
It was meant to be a short-term thing while I find another villa, but I love it here. I really like. I like staying in guest houses. Yeah, I mean, when I was living in the villa, I was actually pretty lonely, because even though my friends would come round, and I was seeing a girl at the time as well, so she'd be there sometimes. And I think for a couple of months, I had a housemate. He joined me for a little bit. It's a bit isolated, unless you live with friends. And being in the guest house, it's you get to meet some new people. And the main attraction here for me is that there's no construction and there's no chance for construction, because the owner owns the whole land. And as I told you, I'm a cat mom and a dog mom. My boys have complete freedom to run around because there's no cars down here. It's super safe. The only thing, that's potentially harmful for them is the snakes, but that's Bali, You just have to hope that, it's really rare to see them, but it does happen. But yeah, living in a guest house is amazing. And for less than $200, I've got my own Wi-Fi. I've got my own specific Wi-Fi in the room. Everyone has their own, channel, I guess, is the right word. I don't know. And it's nice. It's nice. I don't think it's like a permanent thing for me to be here, but for now, I'm saving a lot of money. A lot of money. It's a very low cost of living here. And then food and drink in Canggu, the drink is very, very expensive compared to the rest of Indonesia. I pay Manchester prices. I'm a gin and tonic kind of girl, I love my gin and tonic, and I pay 100k minimum for a gin and tonic. If you want a double or if you want good quality, it's more like 150.
And 100k is
it's about
$6-7.
Right, about that. $6-7. Pretty much similar to Manchester city centre prices. Not as expensive as London or Amsterdam, but it's still pretty expensive. Over New Year's, I popped over to the Gili Islands to do a bit of diving, even with a broken wrist, and I think I paid 40k for a gin and tonic, which is maybe $2, $3. So you can see there's a big difference.
Yep.
It's really kind of what you want to do. If you want to eat local food, you can get it for less than $1. You can get like a full meal. If you want to eat fancy kind of Western food, you're going to pay a bit more. But it's still, if you're earning kind of like from whatever source of income you have, and you've got like a relatively good income, like the standard of living over here is much better than elsewhere.
Agreed. Well, we're running out of time here, but last few things to run through. I might answer these two real quick. The digital nomad community, as I'm sure you'd agree, is massive. There's tons and tons and tons of digital nomads, especially in like the hubs like Canggu and Ubud. The nightlife, I don't know how it is right now during the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, it's like 7 nights a week. There's lots of places to go out. There's lots happening. I imagine it's more subdued now because there's a lot less tourists and travelers. So it's more of like the local and long-term people who probably aren't going out 7 nights a week, I imagine.
I think you'd be surprised. I think you underestimate the community. Okay. There's a big party pretty much wherever. Any night of the week you can find a decent party. Not so much, in the middle of the pandemic, but as we're starting to ease up on the restrictions, you can. Last year we didn't actually celebrate New Year's. The government implemented a zero tolerance on public spaces being open past 11 p.m. I think it was 11 p.m. So New Year's last year was effectively cancelled, whereas this year they had slightly looser restrictions where it was just no fireworks allowed, I think, or something like that, but parties were still happening. As long as they're in line with the regulations, they're allowed to throw some parties. So yeah, I'm not really a big partier anymore. I'm 37, and those 3-day hangovers, that's not where it's at anymore for me, but yeah, if you're into that scene, you can party every night of the week.
And then last question here is on how to book housing. In my past experiences, I found it useful to look for places on booking.com and Airbnb and in the Facebook groups, and then like going and visiting places in person and paying in cash. Is your strategy similar? What has your strategy been for finding housing?
When I first came to Bali, I was going to go do an internship at the dive center because I decided that I wanted to become a dive instructor, and so I was emailing them back and forth from Thailand when I was living there, and I just asked them, is there anywhere that you'd recommend? And they recommended a nice little guest house in Sanur, and all the other divers we all lived together, we all worked together, and a lot of them in the same place.
Sounds great.
And that was awesome. But I think if there's any connections that you have over here, ask them for any recommendations. But I would always suggest, rather than kind of booking straight into a villa or kind of committing to 6 months or 12 months rental, just when you arrive, just get yourself a little guest house, like a room in a guest house. Like $3 million a month is about £150, like less than $200. And that'll just give you a bit of time, a bit of breathing space, and you can just go and see in person. I would absolutely recommend that you go and see places in person before you book, because pictures are not always representative of reality.
Yeah. I definitely am on that team and booking. I mean, I'll book like a hotel for a week, go there, be in person, see places. Well, I appreciate all of your time here and all of your thoughts and your sharing. Last question would be, for anyone who's interested in learning about you and your work or reaching out to you, are there any websites, social media handles that you want to plug?
My Instagram is at Hullabaloo, HULLABALOU, and then an underscore. It's a pun because I'm quite loud and I like to make a big hullabaloo, but then Lou was in LOU. Nobody gets
Perfect.
it.
Well, we'll put a link in the description here. Well, I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on.
No worries. I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed getting to know you as well. And yeah, I thank you so much for this opportunity.